What's going on, guys? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our content, we create content like what you're watching right now, simply to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia, and I have the privilege of being a writer, podcaster, and the director of Film Festival Horrific Hope, first of its kind to be mental health, horror-centric, and mental health focused. If you guys would like more information about that, the movie that we're getting ready to jump into, where to pick it up and buy it if you're like me and still collect Blu-rays and DVDs, and where to check it out digitally. All of that is going to be in the show notes below. Please help me in welcoming the some of the creators behind the creature feature They Crawl Beneath, Dale Fabrigar and Michael
Pare.
Sorry. Yeah. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Doing great.
So what is this thing that you lead in with, that you're into mental health and all that? What is this a foundation you have?
So we are something that is completely unique. We are a podcast network / entertainment site that just also happens to be a nonprofit that uses the content we create in order to bring the discussion of mental health into fandom arena.
Mm-hmm. Wow, because Dale just made a documentary about PTSD and the Veterans Foundation that they have up there in Central Oregon. It's a Central Oregon Veterans Ranch.
Yep.
And it's about the mental health of these veterans who are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and even older veterans. And that's pretty interesting. What is your solution to the mental health problem in America, Josh?
That's a tough question. First off, conversating, erasing the stigma, and listening. I feel like listening are one of those things that go a long way. Sometimes when I feel like sometimes there's so much of our problems feel like we can't talk about it, or we feel like no one's gonna understand us. And instead of finding people that would offer solutions, it should be sometimes listening goes a long way.
Well, it's interesting. You see how you're kind of at a loss because, for the past, since the Civil War and these guys coming home with shell shock and post-traumatic stress disorder, none of these solutions have worked. They've tried really big now with medication, and that's not helping. That's just burying the problem. In the Central Oregon Veterans Ranch, it's kind of like they aren't bringing in people to listen in general. They're bringing in people who have been there and done that. Combat veterans talking and sharing their experiences seems to be very effective right now. It's kind of almost like a 12-step program where if you have the same problem, you can share it with somebody else, because when they're listening compassionately and they can be empathetic. Medication's not working. Sitting in a shrink's office isn't working. What is starting to, be very effective is this circle of guys without a moderator, just sharing their experience, strength, and hope in surviving the trauma that is combat.
Yeah, that's a valid point too. Having people with similar situations. We are people.
No, not similar, who have been there and experienced they have been in combat. Only a combat vet can understand what another combat vet has been through.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
You can't go to school and study this and say, I know what you mean. I've studied this and I've read this book and I've heard about this. It's different when one vet is sitting there and saying, yeah, I wasn't in that province, but I was in this province. And the same thing happened. We're going to, the rest of our life, we're going to be worried about a mortar shell falling on our position, just because that was our existence for 3 years, 2 years. You never knew when it was going to fall on you. And only if you experience that can you really empathize with the person who's broken by it.
Yeah. I will.
All right, let's get to our movie instead of your foundation. But when you brought that up, that just like sparked, because I have a little bit to do with that foundation also, the Central Oregon Veterans Ranch.
I will keep my eye out for that documentary. It sounds really incredible. I love watching mental health documentaries. So, but this movie is They Crawl Beneath is a feels like a throwback movie to kind of a simpler era. You guys talk about the uh, bringing like that nostalgic like 80s, 90s creature feature feel to this film.
Yeah, I was always influenced by films like The Blob,
The
you know,
Blob. I was going to say that.
right? And I'm trying to develop another idea and with something that moves just as slow as The Blob. But yeah, The Blob, it came from beneath the sea, early horror monster creature films. But yeah, for sure. I mean, this film for our fans, obviously, it's obvious that we were influenced by Tremors and Slither and films like that. But yeah, I mean, it's we just try to make the movie. It's a modern piece, and just tell the story that's there today. And it's nuanced in that way. Maybe people want less drama, more monster. I get that too. But in this film, there's just a lot more going on. As you know, and it's interesting. I Googled your page and I thought, wow, mental health. Oh, I think I see the connection there because this is definitely, there's a lot that happens in the mind in this film.
Yeah, so let's jump into like the mental health aspect of this picture. So our protagonist, Danny, is essentially kind of going through PTSD, but he experiences a traumatic experience with his job being a police officer, and it is taken a toll more so less on his like marriage than we kind of get to explore in I would say his psyche. But can you kind of talk about why was it important to kind of bring something like that into what is typically a more like goofier like horror genre? I feel like this is the first time that I've seen something like this film in the subgenre that really kind of deals with heavier, more grounded mental health themes.
Well, I I can say that we didn't approach it with the idea that specifically let's make a mental health
Sure.
message, right? But we did want to make it a little different, our film, about the psychology of what can happen in a stressful situation, as well as what could happen when you get bitten, as well as relationships. And yeah, it's a complex. There's a relationship that happens with him and his fiance, and I would say that the incident that happens that they talk about really does take a toll on their relationship. I mean, it's pretty heavy. But we find out through the end or by the end that it's something worth fighting for. And him coming to terms with the situation, mentally. And how he gets there is really wild. And what gets revealed in the film is a bit twisted in how it happens, and the relationships there with our character Danny and his uncle Bill. But yeah, I mean, I always want to push what we're doing and ground it somehow, because everything's been done, and what can we do? And it's about the relationships. And I think the producers and myself were very careful, or we strove to make characters that people could care about. I know it, like I said, people want more monsters. I get that. But between those moments, there's life that happens. And why do we care about this person? And why should we care about him wanting to live or die or what, So, and I think just giving them that relationship, it's about relationships, helps us care about those characters.
Yeah, one of the things too that I find really fascinating about this is that there's a movie like They Crawl Beneath that exists in a digital age where practical effects all kind of seem but dead unless you're a huge fan of that like subgenre and that kind of art form. What made you guys want to pursue bringing in the practical effects, which look incredible in this movie, to tell this type of story rather than going a digital route?
Well, for me as a director, approached it from the very beginning. I say, if we're going to make a creature movie, I would like them to be practical. It's a challenge because of budget, but there's just something personally that I like. I love seeing practical, organic creatures on the screen. I could tell, I could feel. Also, as well as the actors can actually get a sense of what they're looking at, what they're reacting to. Not, you could always paint a picture or show some previous thing, or maybe one maquette or model of this is what's going to be. But there's something about reacting to it there in the moment that just adds just that much. And to me, there's value to that.
Yeah,
but
practical effects, man, that's it. It's much more stimulating to have something that's actually doing something there in the frame with you or just off camera. It's like the difference between using blanks and squibs than using digital bangs and blood hits. It's it makes it more real for the actor, I believe. And if it's more real for the actor, then that's going to come across on the down the lens.
Absolutely.
So you guys talked about previously about some of the influences like the Blob and other kind of creature features. And I'm curious if in the press junket so far that anyone has also kind of made this comparison.
I'm sorry, what did you say? If anyone else has what?
Made this comparison?
Okay.
There's a sequence in this movie that essentially it's where Danny's fiance kind of takes the baby larva and she takes it to a local person. I don't know the technical term, but like someone that is like better trying to like understand and kind of like push the narrative forward. That kind of sequence to me kind of felt a little bit like Billy taking Gizmo to the local college friend that he had that was a science teacher. In Gremlins, can you talk about some of the other influences that this movie has inspired outside of just like the creature features? Like, was there influences on like the way that you guys wanted to tell the story from a dramatic angle, or even some of the characters and kind of how they interacted?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The audio is just a little garbled on my end. I apologize, Josh. But yeah, I mean, yeah, she ends up taking it to a lab, but many of the scenes that are constructed are there to just inform the audience, sometimes more than we would like. I like to be a little more vague, but there's just a belief that we need to put some information out there, what these are. People are going to care where they might be coming from. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that I was necessarily so influenced by what you mentioned, and was trying to do anything like that. These scenes of help and I mean, assistance was really there to push the movie or the story forward and inform the audience a little bit more.
Yeah, it's expository dialogue. You got to explain stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. So kind of jumping back into the mental health of Danny a little bit, when you guys were setting out to kind of work on this story, what was it in particular? I feel like we are kind of in this era now when you're talking about police and kind of some of the dangerous situations that they're going into. I feel like there's robberies, which is what Danny endures and kind of goes through, feels kind of like another throwback element of this. What was it about like bringing in something like that to influence the character and kind of build a world around him?
Yeah. Again, we were trying to create characters that people could care about. And then we wanted also some in the writing of these characters. We wanted some relationship, conflicts, because conflict is what people sit through and have to overcome, aside from survival, the ultimate conflict. But yeah, I mean, we just thought that, what is something that can really cause this person to behave this way, or, how do they relate with one another? I mean, we just didn't see it as everything was pretty, I love you and everything's going to work out, and it doesn't, life isn't always like that, so, and then of course he's passionate about his job and what he wants to do, and we can relate with those issues, and we just wanted to establish that early on, that, and of course it's about, the film is about choices, and fighting for what you believe in. And I would say that our main character, perhaps if you've seen the film, it's more clear now. But if you haven't, you start to discover how choices can change and shift when truths, revelations appear in front of you, and how that can shape your decisions in their life in the future. So that's sort of the deeper side of things. Consider, aside from there's monsters, and I want to live and get out of here, sure, but what happens, and why do we care about these folks, and the protagonist and the antagonist, one person starts off as one way, and then things shift. And for us, just creating interesting characters for film, coming from doing it in a genre that everything's been done, we just try to make it unique and fun for the audience, and some cool characters for our actors to create.
I thought it was very smart to show that Danny was really doing a dangerous job and that his life was at risk. So you could empathize with the fiance. So it's not just some bitchy, whiny woman. You can see that, yeah, she's, being a cop is dangerous. So there's a justifiable concern on her part that, look, if we're going to get married and have a family, I don't want to be worried that you're going to get shot every time you walk out the door, and that the audience sees what her concern is based on. That was good writing, I thought.
And yeah, and Josh, the mental, turmoil that affects for both sides of those characters, and what they go through, it's a challenge, Also, putting him as a cop also set up the fact that he's not just a regular Joe who, is behind a desk, and maybe it would have been more interesting, but he had, some strength and some fight in him, like, I'm not going to give up. I have some support here. I can do this. Some of that oomph, but yeah, for sure. It was about that relationship between him and his fiance, that complexity that existed, that just plays on everything underneath him and his uncle as well.
So my last question is actually going to be, because I am someone that loves, like I said previously, the practical effects, and I grew up watching documentaries on Stan Winston and Rick Baker, and so that has always kind of been a huge part of me being a cinephile. And I always know that the final design that we see in the film is not always the final design or the first design that you guys necessarily started out with. So for the monster and kind of the evolution of its growth throughout the movie, how did it develop over time as far as the look of the monster goes?
Well, as far as the development of the creatures, we turned to Dan Rebert Creations to create those for us, and he modeled them. But it began with a lot of discussions about what they could be, and I had some ideas, and many different things came out of those conversations. But I guess my vision was pretty big, for our tiny budget. But yeah, there's a lot. There were a lot of sketches, and then of course stuff that I like. Then we pitch it out to the producers, and they're like, "It needs to have more of this, less teeth, more teeth, bigger, smaller, that sort of thing." So yeah, it did change quite a bit from my some of my initial ideas. If you look out there, a clue could be one of our original posters that we did. It might be on IMDb now, but there was a concept there, more like a snake, a little quicker. Mouth was just formed differently. It was wild. And then we brought it back into this crack and brought it back because we were developing it, and it became this a little larger, menacing teeth. And so we did what we could with knowing that they were going to be operated practically with rods and puppet work, basically. So that's kind of how it evolved, you know, and went very quickly as well too. He and his team just jammed through it. I mean, it was just, so we're really lucky, and I'm really pleased with what we got, and it was a lot of fun.
This movie looks great, and I can't wait for audiences to get to experience it. The movie is called They Crawl Beneath, and it is going to be out on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital platforms beginning October 4th. Dale, Michael, thank you guys so much for you guys' time. And where can people find you guys online as well?
I'm on Instagram, Dale Fabrigar. You can check me out there.
I'm on Instagram, Mike Kevin Pare.
Okay. We'll provide all those links in the show notes below. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
And make sure you guys check out The Crawl Beneath, and have a good night.
Thanks, Josh.
Good night. Thank you.